Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant code calculator to let you get as many codes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support. Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns. And one of them you actually saw a few minutes ago, Sam Quinnen's project, 47 Furious Tales, was actually printed by Mixum. And they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now they're running a promotion where the listeners on my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. And without further ado, I have with me Cosplayer Colleen Cosplay. So welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, I am super excited because I have been wanting to do this interview for almost 6, possibly 8 weeks, and then you were in the middle of con season.
Oh, yep. Yeah, sorry for making you wait.
No. It's weird because you start Googling things and looking up on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, cool, cosplayers and other things, and then you popped up on my Instagram, you popped up on my YouTube, and I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to her. And so I think the best place to start here is with how you got into cosplay, in case it isn't obvious that you're a cosplayer.
Yes, I am a cosplayer. This is not my everyday look, to be honest. So how I got into cosplay, I feel like, a lot of people have the same story when it starts. Like, you just try out a con. I went to my first con when I was just in high school, and my dad took me. And then, like, you get into the con and you're just like wide-eyed, like, oh my goodness, this exists. And then you like slowly get into cosplay. I wasn't really into it until I started my YouTube channel 3 years ago. Before that, it was just kind of like maybe a cosplay a year. Like, I don't really care that much. And now I do YouTube and I upload weekly, and I'm in cosplay like a whole lot of the time, and it's kind of crazy. So
yeah, and it's super interesting because I am curious, what was your first cosplay? And closet cosplays technically count, but everybody has different rules. Some people count them, some people don't. Mm-hmm. So what was your first cosplay?
Okay, so I've heard people say that, like, you count your first cosplay as the first thing you called a cosplay, like, instead of a Halloween costume. So going by those rules, I was the Flash from DC Comics.
And so what inspired that? Because it's very interesting how people view things, and obviously, what's the story behind that one?
So I love the Flash. He's my favorite DC Comics character. I loved him in like Justice League Unlimited, which I watched when I was a kid. So like, as soon as I discovered cosplay, I really wanted to cosplay, but I didn't know how to sew. And I told my grandma to sew it for me, and she is like the sweetest lady on the planet. And she agreed to sew me this Flash costume that I designed. And that was my very first one. I wore it to RadCon. I wore it I think I wore it to like Rose City. I wore it on Halloween. I wore that costume so many times because I just loved it so much, because I love the Flash so much.
And I enjoy the Flash, and the Flash is very, very fast in a lot of ways. And so obviously, though, I do want to get into some other cosplays. But before we do, I do want to talk a little bit about Inside Baseball. And one of the things that you are is that you're a YouTuber who creates a lot of content and about your cosplays. And I'm going to give a little insight where you have a physical disability. Mm-hmm. And so what is that physical disability, so that we're all aware, and I don't want to make any assumptions on anything?
Yeah, no, you're fine. So I actually have a video on my YouTube channel, like explaining the whole story. So like the story is public out on the internet. So I have a disorder called chondrosis. So it's the degeneration of cartilage. So if you think about like your joints, they are protected by this neat little thing called cartilage. And that's why you can run and you can jump and it doesn't hurt because your cartilage is stopping your bones from hitting each other. And it's like protecting your bones in your joint. And my cartilage is really bad at that. So it's deteriorating and it's detaching from my bone. So when I try and like walk and jump like everyone else, it's not protecting my bones and it's really painful. So I use crutches and I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. And so I use different devices to kind of help manage the pain. And I just really wanted to kind of share my experiences on YouTube. When I was first dealing with my disorder, I started having symptoms in high school. I was looking for like anyone on the planet that was like me, and I found nothing. Like I could not find disabled cosplayers anywhere. And I feel like in my mind that just translated to like, oh, disabled people aren't welcome in cosplay. Otherwise, I would find disabled cosplayers on the internet and I would find disabled cosplayers at cons. And it was just like a really tough time. And as I like worked through to my head, you know, there's a lot you have to process with a disability. And as I was kind of getting through it, I was like, well, like, why don't I be that person? Like, there's no reason I can't just start a YouTube channel and make that content because like, I don't see anyone else on the planet really making a lot of it. So I started my YouTube channel. I make a lot of videos on cosplay, and every now and then I make a video about my experiences cosplaying with a disability, just so it's out there. And there's a really awesome community of disabled cosplayers out there. I just didn't know where to find them at first.
Yeah, so obviously I've seen disabled cosplayers. I've seen some really cool things. I don't know if you're familiar with BlurredCon, but one of the coolest things I saw was that some guy had a wheelchair that propped him up so that he was almost standing. And
oh, I know him. He's very cool.
So I didn't have a conversation, but obviously I saw it. I'm like, oh shit, that's really cool. Like, it's one of those weird things. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's one of those things that you got to see it. But what was this like really coming into that community and obviously making content on YouTube and then saying, oh, there's a lot more people like this and have this mentality and also have, you know, a disability and have issues with it, and, you know, you can communicate because all of a sudden, you know, hate to say this, but cons are not accessible in a lot of ways. And there's real problems in that segment. So what was that entire experience? And then also being a resource in a lot of ways as well, because it's the idea that there's somebody out there who has a disability who says, you know, I don't want to cosplay, or I don't think I can. And then they might see you and they're like, oh, this can actually be done. So very interesting.
So when I started, like, I mean, like, first and foremost, I was making the YouTube channel for myself. It was like a way to express myself. And I think making content and putting it out there about how I coach with my disability, like, really helped me like process my disability and find the best way to share it with a larger audience. And kind of like you have to work through a lot of things when you have a disability, and making the content was largely for myself. And, you know, when you start YouTube, you got like 0 subscribers, like no one knows who you are, no one cares. But as I kept posting content, people started to notice, and I started to get a lot of comments like, hey, your story is a lot like my story. And I didn't see any disabled cosplayers, but then I found you. And as I continued making content, I got more and more of those comments. And people would ask me questions. They would ask if I could make videos on certain topics. And from there, it kind of grew. And I discovered other disabled cosplayers, mostly through Instagram. There were quite a few of them on Instagram. And it just, it took a while to find the community. But when I found the community, I just felt so at home, and everyone's so supportive. And it's really amazing. It's just when you are like a small person new to cosplay, you don't know where to look to find these people. You kind of have to look a little bit.
Yeah, I know the feeling on people who are similar and
Mhm.
in that world. And even going further into this, because
Mhm.
obviously, cosplay is such an interesting world, both I would imagine in the disability
Mhm.
cosplay world and the regular cosplay. And how do you figure out what characters you want to cosplay and what factors in? Because
Mhm.
building cosplays is tricky in general, and I would imagine that there's characters you're drawn to, and there's characters that might be difficult to build out a costume for and a cosplay for. And so, how does that all work in your creation process?
I mean, like, I guess similar to other cosplayers, I choose the character I really like the most, whatever I'm really into at the time. But there is definitely a factor with my disability where I have to either make the cosplay accessible, or there are some cosplays that just they're not really within the realm of what I feel like I can make accessible. So, like, think Cinderella's dress, from the live action, like the huge one. I think that one's
I've seen it like
gorgeous.
10 times.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the guy to ask that question too. Like,
Well, just imagine the biggest princess ball gown you can. And I feel like that's one that's just like, it'd be cool to make. It'd really challenge my sewing skills, but trying to make it work with a wheelchair. And people have, it's just like, there are easier things I could do with other characters I love. Like, it's not like I only have half a dozen characters to choose from. Like, let me tell you, I probably have like a few hundred cosplans up here in my head, okay? So of the like 100 that I'm trying to like organize into like most favorite character and least, I definitely sift through and pick ones I think will be more accessible. But that like definitely doesn't mean you can't cosplay something because you're disabled. You can cosplay whatever you want. It's just like I'm definitely going to pick ones that I think are a little bit easier for me.
and even to go further, because one of the things that, and I've interviewed a lot of cosplayers, and this always comes up, cosplay gets expensive quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we're laughing. I'm not a cosplayer, and I have a pretty good idea how expensive it gets, between finding materials, substituting materials, having to, pick up things,
Mm-hmm.
messing up things. Also, sometimes, materials just naturally, are pricey, as well as wigs can be expensive, shoes can be expensive, and everything in between. And so, how do you balance all of that out and figure out how to make it work? And then also, you have the added challenge of making it accessible and
Mm-hmm.
utilizing and making certain choices because, I mean, obviously, I have a physical disability and I walk a certain way. And so, I like wearing shorts around because I actually like feeling air on my legs because it tells me where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's psychological or not, I also don't wear socks because
Mm-hmm.
I can feel easier and vibrations more when I'm not wearing it. And so choices are made. And so how is that all factoring in and even balancing all that stuff? Because it's so interesting. And I don't think people understand that
Mm-hmm.
you actually have to think about it. A perfect example is that you may not be able to put, Christmas is coming up. If you're doing a Christmas thing, you may not be able to put jingle bells on your feet, for lack of a better word, because they might create a hazardous situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like even just with this cosplay, first of all, the cape, I took it in. So like you'll notice the cape actually isn't that full. So this cape actually hangs along the back of my wheelchair without getting into the wheels. So I also made it short enough that when I'm sitting in my wheelchair, like it won't get caught in the wheels. I'm not going to run over it. So even though I love a big flowy cape, I really had to like sacrifice that for this cosplay to make it fit. And then it also snaps onto a harness that I wear underneath my shirt so that if it gets caught in an elevator or something, or if for some reason it gets moved and catches in my wheelchair, it should just snap off and I won't get strangled. So that's like another step that like most cosplayers would just be like Supergirl, cape, red fabric, make a cape. Whereas I'm like, okay, now I have my cape. How many panels can I put into it without it getting to my wheelchair wheels? And then what safety measures do I need to put into it so that if it does get caught, I'm still in a safe situation? And you have to do like just so much thinking with each costume. And like skirts has to be brought in. I have to really watch what I'm doing with the sleeves so those don't get caught. And like, even just like little things, like to get around a convention, I wear something called push gloves. So those are little gloves that have rubber on them, and it helps get friction with the wheelchair. So some of my costumes just don't really work with the push gloves. And, you know, so there's just like all these things I have to think about, and you just have to be like really forward thinking.
It's very interesting because that's very structural, and then obviously do all that and have the materials to do that, you know, obviously that's an added challenge on cost to some degree, I would imagine. And unless it's not, I mean, I don't know. And so how do you balance the cost? And also I would imagine that some materials must be safer than others by definition.
I feel like cost doesn't, honestly, like for my disability specifically, a lot of the things that would cost more are actually not accessible. Like ball gowns get really expensive, and I don't wear ball gowns. Big wings and like armor.
So really money's not the problem.
Yeah, money's not the problem. So like, I mean,
you
like,
have the same problem every cosplayer has, where it's expensive to cosplay.
It is expensive to cosplay. That's true. I'm really fortunate that I got through college with a STEM degree, so I don't have as many of the problems of the like poor starving cosplayer like thing, because I have an engineering degree and people pay money for that, and this is just my hobby. So I just take my money from my job and I just, you know, dump it into cosplay.
I should have got a STEM degree.
That's the best way to work with my finances, but like, here we are.
I should have got a STEM degree. Instead, I became a political science major, and in 2 years, I'm going to be running for Senate. So here we go.
There you go.
I'm really a criminal. That's really what I am. I'm just going to be a lovable criminal, because that's what, you know, Washington is. It's the biggest mob is the government. But I digress right there. As I'm speaking to Supergirl, I say that. And obviously, I now really want to dive into your cosplays.
Yep.
And I don't want to deal with the obvious one, first and foremost, because I am a huge Naruto mark, and I love Naruto.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you know about me. I've done everybody from team, I think it's team 9, I want to say, the Inu, Choji, and Shikamaru.
Shikacho.
And so I've done the 3 of them, and I want to do Asuma, and I'm working on it. But obviously, I love Naruto, and you have Tamari, and you've done a bunch of versions of her.
Yes.
And they're very interesting. So we have traditional version of her. We have the winter kimono version of her. We got a Japanese traditional kimono. And obviously, she has a very big fan. And you have one of the best props, which is a Shikamaru lying around. So,
I do.
so what's the story behind her? Because she is one of those characters that is very likable in Naruto, and she also is very scary in Boruto.
Yeah, she is like my favorite Naruto character. So when I was and it was one of my first cosplays I did. So when I was kind of lining up my cosplans, like I knew I wanted to do Tamari, and I also was looking for something that could really challenge me at the time, because I was just learning how to sew. And with Tamari, she has a really difficult wig, and the prop is crazy. So I was like, I want something that'll challenge me. And I learned a lot on that project, and like, she's always going to be so important to me because I made a tutorial on how I made the fan, and that's still like, that's kind of what got me noticed on YouTube. Like, I mean, yes, I do the content about cosplaying with a disability, but the main stuff that actually like people find my channel through is generally tutorials. So that was like the tutorial that brought me from like 5 subscribers up to like 50, which probably sounds like still like very little, but 0 to 50 subscribers is actually like a huge deal. So yeah, she's my favorite, and her and Shikamaru are my absolute favorite couple from Naruto. I think they did a really good job with their relationship and showing it in the manga. So when I was going to cons with my husband, I decided that he could be Shikamaru, and we do a cute little couples cosplay. So it's still one of my favorites.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with her, and then even diving into Inno as well. And Inno is similar to your Tamari cosplay in some ways, and also very different. And so, what was that like as well? Because that's a very interesting, cosplay. And what is very cool is that, and I'm going to just sort of say it, is that in some photo shoots, you're wearing a knee brace with both of these characters, and in others, you're not. And what is that like to, come into that role, for lack of a better word, and showing it out a little bit? Because I think it's very important that people see that, hey, people with disabilities and cosplay is for everyone.
I mean, it really started with actually this cosplay I did, which was based off of BB-8 from Star Wars. It was like a really old cosplay. Anyways, so I, at a time, was like really self-conscious about my mobility aids. Most people are, especially when they're younger. And I would actually be that person who would go to a photo shoot and like, I'd be wearing my brace to get there. I'd take off my brace for the photos and then put it back on afterwards. And I think a lot of people with chronic illness can relate. I mean, there's definitely like a lot to deal with. Honestly, there's a lot to process, because you're like, if people know I'm disabled, like, what are they going to think of me? And it's, your self-confidence takes a huge hit. So the first time I wore a knee brace was actually with BB-8, because I had this knee brace that was obnoxiously orange. I hated that it was obnoxiously orange, but it was the only like affordable one that provided the support I need. And BB-8 also happens to be an obnoxiously orange colored droid. So I actually wore the brace with the costume, and a lot of people didn't even realize it was a like mobility aid. They just kind of thought it was part of the costume. And so I kind of eased into it. And once that went okay, and I realized that the world was not out to get me, I was like, maybe I should wear mobility aids when I need them, instead of going to a photo shoot and then having my knees swell up and then icing them all night. Like, what a revolutionary idea. What if you used your mobility aids that you needed? So Tamari and Eno were kind of after that, when I was like realizing, oh, wow, like it's okay. Like it's fine. So I was still very self-conscious at the point, but with Naruto, they all wear like little netting knee weird things anyways. So I was still pretty comfortable with it, but it really just came down to like, was I in pain that day? Use my mobility aid, because I kind of was starting to build my confidence little by little.
Yeah, it gets very interesting when, people start accepting you and you start accepting yourself. And, it's fascinating. And obviously, I think, though, that it's slightly different. A knee brace, going to crutches, a wheelchair. I think there's
absolutely.
I think naturally, things are just viewed slightly different, in my experience, at the very least. And I've never been in a wheelchair, and I am a stubborn goat, where I won't be. I would rather be in pain, and that's just how I run.
I've been there. Yep.
And so, and speaking about that, obviously, you also did Rock Lee. And
yeah, my boy Rock Lee.
and so, what's the story behind that? Because obviously, you've done some very cool stuff with this. There's you in a wheelchair, and then there's also you utilizing crutches and sort of getting the kick photo shoot going. And it's very interesting to figure out how to incorporate both of those things into Rock Lee and understanding how to utilize it. And so what was the thought process behind that? Because
Rock Lee is like the best, honestly. I just wore him last weekend, so I'm still like on a Rock Lee high. Like, he's so much fun to wear. So I really wanted to do Rock Lee and Mike Guy for SakuraCon 2020, and now we all know that SakuraCon 2020 canceled with every subsequent con for 2 years. But anyways, I still made Rock Lee, and I was kind of trying to think what I could do with him. And so I used to be a competitive martial artist. I did Shotokan karate. So I do know a bit of martial arts back from when I was able-bodied and able to do that. And that's something I've always loved about like incorporating into my Naruto cosplays. So I was trying to think like, okay, like what can I take from my experience doing karate when I was able-bodied and apply to this cosplay with still having my mobility aids and still being as safe and as I possibly can, and as much risk as I'm willing to take for, you know, a cosplay photo shoot. So I did a lot of the seated like punches and stuff. So that was safe. And then I realized I could do something called crutch jumps. I don't do them anymore. It's a little hard on my knees, but there was a time that I could do the crutch jumps. It was very popular on this little app called TikTok, and it kind of blew up over there. So I would do dances with my crutches, and after you've maybe you can relate. After you've used crutches for enough years, you get pretty good at using them. Like you kind of figure it out. And I was able to balance on the crutches just because I've used them for so long, and my arm muscles had kind of like built up for it. So I figured out how to do kicks assisted with the crutches so that I could kind of slow down the descent from the kick and it wouldn't hurt my knees quite as much. And that was just how I was still able to take a little bit of my time as a martial artist and apply it to Rock Lee, because I love Rock Lee and I love that he does taijutsu and I just relate to him so much, and he has fabulous eyebrows.
And obviously, I mean, I thoroughly enjoy, you know, Naruto, and it's really an amazing show on what they did with it. Long show. I'll say that, but not as long as a One Piece, because that's a freaking monster of a show.
Oh, I love One Piece too. I have like 95 volumes of it in my house, so like I've read all the manga.
I stopped a long time ago.
Oh, no. I have all the manga.
I'm going to just buy all of it when it all is finished, because it's going to be nice boxes. It's going to be easy and it's going to be nice. But I do have the hollow foil, like first 12 volumes of One Piece. Mm-hmm. Those things are nice. They're nice. But I digress right there. I want to talk about a cosplay that's super interesting, and it's your Pucciana cosplay.
Oh gosh.
That thing is rather furry. It's rather sewy. Mm-hmm. And what's the story behind that? Because I think if people see it, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, the ears and even just the face makeup and making all that work, because it's a pretty intense cosplay. So
the story, kind of anticlimactic, I guess. So basically, we had a really, really bad snowstorm a few years ago, and it was so bad that like none of the cars my family had could really go to the fabric store or anything, and school was canceled, so I couldn't go to college either. So I was stuck in the house, and I was like, I didn't have a whole lot of sewing supplies and fabric now. Like my fabric stash now, like I could probably clothe a family for a year, but at that time I didn't have much in my fabric stash. So I was like, I need to make something. I'm going crazy because I can't leave the house. So I like looked at my fabric stash, and all I had was faux fur from a previous cosplay I'd done. And I was like, what can I do with faux fur? Why do I have 2 yards of faux fur? And so I just kind of thought about it for a while. And I was like, well, I guess I could like put together a Pucciana cosplay. So I put it together in, I think, 5 days. And so like it was literally just scraps that I just kind of threw together, because it was the only thing I could make while it was still snowing, because I couldn't go to the store. So like, no, I was not planning on cosplaying Pucciana until I could not leave my house. It was kind of just a very last minute, like, what can I do to not go insane?
So what is that like? Because I think this is something that's super interesting, is when somebody says, hey, look, I'm going to take what's in my house and make a cosplay, make it work. And I can't leave my house. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like a challenge. So what is that like to say, okay, I got to figure out how to do this, and I'm really testing my skills. And it's not perfect. And obviously, if you could get more materials and other stuff, it's always, but it's still pretty cool considering, and really well done considering what you had. And I think that there's a saying where if you only have so many resources, what can you produce with those resources? And I think it's very important, and I think a lot of cosplayers don't know necessarily how to do that. So what is that like for you to really even say, hey, I can do something like this at this point?
It's a really fun challenge. It's also really frustrating sometimes when you have like everything except like one trim. I actually did a little kind of series on my YouTube channel called Quarantine Cosplay Builds. So that's back when you like literally could not walk into a fabric store, part of the pandemic. And I made a handful of cosplays just from stuff in my house. It's a really good mental exercise. And I definitely think there's a little bit of an intersection between engineering and cosplay there, which is a connection I never thought would be made, but it totally is. Because as an engineer and as a cosplayer, it's definitely taking what you have, what resources you have, and having to really think and plan. You only have so many yards of fabric. How are you going to lay out your pattern to get everything out of it? Like, okay, maybe you have the wrong color of fabric, but maybe you have fabric dye. And it's just a very, very good mental exercise. And I definitely think there's a little bit of crossover between, you know, kind of STEM thinking and math problems and planning out quarantine builds. So it was a lot of fun. It's just sometimes you get so frustrated that you hate it because you have everything to make a certain cosplay except like 1 yard of a certain fabric. And so you have to pick a different cosplay.
Yeah, and I can imagine dealing with that. And I know the feeling because I like playing with Legos. And sometimes things don't work so well. And you only have so many bricks. Only so many bricks.
Right.
But really do want to get into some more of your cosplays, and I think one of the ones that I thoroughly enjoy that you've done is the Lucy from Fairy Tale.
Hey, that was a quarantine cosplay build.
And what's cool about this one is that you've done it in two ways. So you've done it with the crutches, and then you've done it with the wheelchair. And even talking about that, what is that like? Because building out, I would imagine, a wheelchair cosplay, there are certain things you can do. Obviously, you know, having, you know, I think it's the spokes on the wheels you could do stuff with. And also, you know, draping it in the back, I guess on the back of the chair, and then obviously cosplaying yourself. And so what is that like, figuring out what you can do and even building that out, but also keeping it safe? Because at the end of the day, this is an assistive device. And if you're not safe, and it's not a safe thing, then it's really not a good idea to go and mess with a device that could potentially harm you or put you in a weird situation. So what is that like? Because I think people who have disabilities need to know when they're cosplaying, the first and foremost, I would imagine, is safety.
Definitely. Yeah, so there was a time where like I was really in between crutches and a wheelchair. Like I could still do a whole lot with my crutches. It's just by the end of the photo shoot, I'd get like my legs would really hurt and I'd want to move to the wheelchair. So there is definitely a time where like every costume I tried to make both crutch friendly and wheelchair friendly. And I do like to decorate the mobility aids too. But like it definitely is another thing that like took kind of a bit of engineering behind it, because I had to make covers that could go on the devices that were completely removable so that I could use, you know, whatever fabric I wanted and I wouldn't be altering the mobility aid. So they had to be removable. They had to not interfere with any of the motion of the mobility aid. So with my crutches, I still had to be able to move the forearm cuff. And then with the wheelchair, obviously nothing could get in the wheels. Nothing could prevent being able to push it or being able to use it properly. So it's just a lot of thinking about like, okay, how am I going to make this in a way that matches the cosplay? Because that's just fun for me. It's just a fun little detail, but it's still safe for me. And it took a lot of trial and error. It took a few little blueprints, but I finally figured out a good method and I put them up on YouTube. And I think a few people have told me that they've tried it and it's worked for them too. So I feel like I've kind of like hit something that's pretty good.
Yeah, and you've done this with a few other cosplays. Obviously, you've done this with Carmen Sandiego. I think you've done some Pokemon Spoke stuff as well. And so what is that like? Because obviously I would imagine at a certain point, you know, once you build one set of, you know, I don't know what you call them, but wheel covers.
Yes, that's what I call them, yeah.
It's kind of like, you know how to make the next one and you know how to make the next one, and then you can just change them interchangeably, you know? And so what is that like, figuring that process? And then also having something that's sort of, I would imagine, pretty quick that signifies and fits with the character. Because that's the other thing too, is that, you know, you want to make it fit and you want to make it work and you want to make it connect. And so that's something that I think is very, very important, where people have to get creative on how to say, okay, I have a disability. How do I make this work in this way? And I think you've done a really good job with that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I had a really good thing going with the crutch covers when I just use crutches. I could knock out a pair of crutch covers in like 30 minutes. And it was just supposed to be like a little one-off thing because everyone was like, oh, why don't you try decorating your mobility aids? So I made a crutch cover, and then it went from like a little like cute little thing to kind of like a standard on my channel where everyone was like, this is what you do. Like Colleen Cosplay just decorates her mobility aids. And I was like, well, now I got to do it for all of them. So it was really great with the crutches. I can knock one of those out in 30 minutes. The wheel covers take me about 6 hours. So I actually don't make many wheel covers just because it takes so much time to make them. Like that's like, you know, a whole day, or if I'm having a pain flare, that might be a whole weekend just to make wheel covers. And I still got to make the cosplay. So I haven't been doing quite as many wheel covers, but I'm still trying to like find something that I can make faster. And I haven't found it yet. It's still going through the prototyping phase to find something that's faster. I tried making some out of foam instead of fabric when I did Captain America. And that also took like 5 or 6 hours. And I'm just trying to find something I can make in like 2 hours or something. So it's definitely...
We're going to talk about Captain America soon.
Oh boy.
I promise we're going to talk about Captain America. But obviously, you know, I do want to talk about, we did speak about BB-8, and I do like your BB-8 cosplay. That's very, very clever. I also think it's, you know, not robotic, and it's very much more of a Japanese feel and touch to it. I think it's very, very cool in that regard. And then obviously you've done a bunch of video game stuff with Final Fantasy as Riku, and, you know, Felicia from Fire Emblem and all that stuff. And so that's awesome. And then obviously the Supergirl stuff is great. So obviously I appreciate you putting on Supergirl.
Thanks.
And so because I enjoy Supergirl, and we've spoken about the cape and making it safe, and also understanding how to do it. And what's very cool about this is that there's a lot of photos that show you in crutches with Supergirl, also, you know, sort of, I don't want to say covering it up, but having the cape sort of disguising it a little bit. And there's a lot of stuff going on with those photos. And what is that like to really get to play around with that and also have the ability to shoot at so many different angles and offer so many different, you know, shots? Because, you know, it is cool when people do things like that.
Yeah. So Supergirl, like, she was another like kind of one-off build. I found fabric like on clearance, and it was the really nice stuff. So I was just like, what can I make with this? I guess I'll make Supergirl. And people just ate it up. People love Supergirl. And I get comments all the time saying, when's your next Supergirl? I only make one Supergirl build a year now because I guess so many people who are like, more Supergirl, they love it. So I've done like 4, 5, 6. I don't know. I've done a lot of different Supergirls. And that's why, like you're saying, you see different pictures, some with the crutches, some with the wheelchairs. It's just because I've done Supergirl for like 2 years or something now. So, and I have a lot of versions of her. So you can almost kind of see the progression of my disability throughout the Supergirl photos. You know, you can see the time when I had my brace and wore Supergirl, the time when I had crutches, and the time with the wheelchair. So it's just kind of been, you know, whatever mobility aid makes me feel more comfortable. I honestly don't put a lot of thought into like, oh, in this photo, I'll use this mobility aid. In this, I'll use this. It's literally just like, how grumpy are my knees today? Oh, they're this grumpy? I guess I'll use a wheelchair today. Like, I don't really think about it that much anymore.
and even going further into Supergirl, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've competed with Supergirl at cosplay competitions.
I have.
And this is I got a feeling where we're entering controversial territory, and we're about to open up a bag of worms and some insight. I got a feeling this is where we're heading. My coworkers are waiting for this when they see this, because they know it's coming. So first and foremost, what prompted you to want to compete? Because cosplay, and I speak to a lot of cosplayers, some of them just say, hey, look, I just want to cosplay. I want to do photo shoots, and I don't really care about competing. It's not for me. I'm not a competitive person, and that's not why I'm into cosplay. I'm into have a good time, and I'm into, getting my photo taken and people complimenting my cosplay. And then other people say, look, I want to compete, and I want to show up what I want to do. So I'm very curious, what made you want to compete first and foremost?
So I've always liked getting to compete. Like I said, I did competitive martial arts. I competed in kata and sparring for a while. So when there came a point that I had to give up martial arts, I was definitely looking for something else that I could really grow and get better at and show off. And I don't know, competing feels good, honestly. So, I basically took all the time and energy that I'd put into athletics, and I was like, okay, I can't do these things, but what can I do? And I can still sew. Sewing is a very accessible hobby. So as soon as I figured out that sewing is something that I can very much do with my disability, I just took everything that I was putting into competitive martial arts and stuff, and I put it into sewing, and I decided I wanted to be competitive with that too. And honestly, the cosplay contest is just so cool. And I love the craftsmanship part of it, where you get to be backstage with the other cosplayers, and they're just oh, you used this type of stitch instead of this type of stitch. And I see that you used a 4-way stretch instead of a 2-way stretch. And we get really technical and nerdy. And I just love it so much. And seeing the other cosplayers, seeing the judges, there's just so much you can learn and so much you can show. And I just think competing is the best, honestly.
And so to even go further into this, obviously, you use a knee brace, crutches, a wheelchair. Yep. And so what was that like going into a competition? Because I hate to say this, most stages are not really that great accessible. There's stairs. Even if there isn't stairs, there's a ramp. There could be social stigmas. And then there's a whole bunch of other issues that are not disability oriented in cosplay competitions. I have enough friends who have told me things that, obviously judges are corrupt. Let's put it that way.
I've had some pretty good judges.
Let's just say that, I've heard stories from 3 or 4 different people who don't know each other who told me a very similar story where, certain judges are corrupt and certain people are doing something, and maybe the judge is a male and there's a female involved. I am just saying everybody can use their imagination. So what is that like for you going into that? Because obviously, and I'm a very cynical person, we all have biases. And when somebody looks different, those things start being thrown out there. And even going before into our biases, even getting onto the stage as well is tricky.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so this is actually something.
I threw a lot at you.
Yeah. No, we'll take it piece by piece. This is something I think is one of my most asked questions. So I did end up making a video on it just because so many questions. So I guess accessibility first. So physical accessibility, that's pretty cut and dry. Does it have stairs or no? So a lot of the ones I've competed in, they did have stairs. And there was a time where with the knee brace, I could still get up and down fairly well. So I was just kind of well, if someone's there to help me and I can use my brace, that's fine. Now I use the wheelchair, and I just request a ramp. I give a month in advance, usually to the convention. And honestly, most conventions, if they're actually worth anything, if you message them, email the person who's in charge of the convention or whatever and say, hey, I need a wheelchair ramp, they'll probably get one for you. And I think a lot of cosplayers don't know that. You just simply need to ask, and most of the time they'll bring it. I don't get it. Okay. A ramp is helpful to more than just disabled people. Like, it's helpful to everyone. It's helpful to the people with the giant cosplay with wings. It's helpful to the people who have the giant robot armor. Like, literally, a ramp is helpful for everyone. It stops people in cosplay who are like have bad like vision because of their giant Jedi helmet or whatever from falling off the stage and suing you. Like, I cannot comprehend why conventions just wouldn't have a ramp, except that just maybe they haven't thought of it. So I always request a ramp in advance. And that went really well for the last 2 cons I attended. They had a ramp there, no problems at all. Like, everything was taken care of. So I definitely recommend at least reaching out and asking. So that's kind of the physical part of it. Now the bias. Whew, okay. So
no, because the reason why I say this is so I'll give my insight as a spectator, and is that, you know, there are judges who have favorites and people play favorites, and I don't think that's a disability issue. I think that, you know, people play favorites. I also think people tend to associate with certain things, and that it's very hard to break people's biases, you know, and then you start throwing in differences, and then you start throwing in things. I'm going to complicate it a little bit more, but, you know, you start throwing in the fact that, you know, somebody's not a pure cosplay, for instance, and they're trying to be a pure cosplay. So if you came out and said you're Supergirl and you're dressed as Batman, you don't deserve to win, hands down, because that's not competing on a fair term. But I think that also starts getting in there, where if you're using an assistive device, that's not really in your control yet. Unfortunately, you may or may not be judged on that. And I think that definitely plays in. I mean, unless I'm completely wrong, I'm not in anybody's head. I don't want to make any accusations.
No, honestly, like, I'm in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and every judge I've had has been like absolutely the best ever. Now, to be fair, like, you know, we have a pretty tight-knit community in the Pacific Northwest, and pretty much everyone who's judging, like, kind of knows me from YouTube anyways. So, like, I mean, I guess people kind of know what to expect. They know I make videos about cosplaying with mobility aids. So I've never received anything mean from judges. I've never received pity points. Every time I've won, like, it was very clear I earned it from a craftsmanship standpoint. And every time I've lost, it was like very clear someone else earned it from a craftsmanship standpoint. So, like, I have heard horror stories from other people. I guess I'm just, like, really, really blessed with the community in the Pacific Northwest. Literally never been a problem. I've never had pity points. I've also, like, never been discriminated against for, like, by the judges, at least. Like, I don't know. We just have, like, really, really amazing judges. And, like, again, they know me and they know what I do on YouTube also. So I don't know if that factors into it, but it could.
No, because the reason why I ask it up is that, you know, I was in my class. I don't think my coworkers are going to mind. And we were speaking about the charity discussion. We were going through theoretic models of disability. Right. And the charity, you know, that, you know, it's this idea that people take pity and that people think they're doing, you know, good, and that, you know, people, you know, go down that path, and people want to help somebody and they want to overstep their boundary. And so it's very, very complicated in that regard, because it's a real issue in the disability community where, you know, I don't need somebody's charity because I'm disabled, you know, and sometimes that happens because sometimes somebody feels bad, or they're like, you know, I'm fortunate enough. And, you know, there are people, and they're not bad people, who are doing that. They just don't understand what they're doing, because they're doing it because it makes them feel good. And that's the theory of charity. When I give to charity, I'm very honest about this. I'm giving to a cause because it makes me feel good. I also believe in the cause, but it's really, a lot of charity is selfish. It starts in a selfish emotion in a lot of ways. And, you know, I'm going to get flack for this, but, you know, that's a good way it does, because it's about how I feel when I'm giving to the American Red Cross. It's not about the American Red Cross, or it's how it makes me look. It is also how it goes. And then there's also tax issues. but that's a different discussion for
Okay, yeah. No,
so
like
that's why I bring all this up, because this does come up with people with disabilities
yeah,
in
definitely.
cosplay, and it comes up with disabilities and other things. And I've seen some crazy things in the disability world, and obviously, you know, it's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah, no, I haven't been like I haven't gotten the pity that much, honestly. Like I know a lot of cosplayers get it, but I haven't really gotten a lot of like, oh, she should win because she's disabled. Like I said, like the judges we have here are honestly fantastic, and they're literally breaking it down to like what sewing techniques you used, what fabric choice was, what trims you like. They're literally just looking at the garment construction. And as far as like other congoers, other people, I don't really get the charity thing as much. Maybe like someone will like share my post on Instagram or something, but like that's the most. I honestly like this is really sad, but I honestly get more of the discrimination side of disability where you're treated unfairly.
Describe that to me, because I don't know how you view discrimination.
Oh boy. So
disability. And the reason why I asked this is that I'm not asking to be cute or anything, because I know how it is for me as just a person who walks on crutches. I understand what discrimination looks like. I understand when somebody's looking at me in a not so nice way. I don't know what it looks like on a cosplay level. And I think that's very important.
Oh boy. Okay. So, I mean, like I said, I don't really get the charity. I don't get the like, oh, you poor thing that much. I do get a lot of like, Supergirl shouldn't use crutches, or like you're not strong enough to be Supergirl. Like disabled people shouldn't be Supergirl because she's strong. Like the one that always stuck in my mind is when I first wore Supergirl and competed her. And like, oh, this is so bad. Like as I was entering the stage, the MC of the entire contest literally called out my disability in front of the whole audience. And I just was like so uncomfortable. Like as I was walking up the stage, she was like, oh yeah, like what happened to Supergirl or something. And like, oh my gosh, like why would you do that? Like, dude, I'm here to compete in your contest and you don't even have a ramp and you're going to call out my disability in front of like all of the audience. So I get like, I've gotten a lot more like discrimination like that, where people try and pick apart my cosplay or say that I'm not accurate. And I just like, I don't know, maybe I would like the pity every now and then to at least mix it up a little.
because yeah, not to take a shot at my friend, but he's like, no judge in their right mind would take points away from a cosplayer that needs an aid or disabled. If they do, they shouldn't be allowed to judge. And I think everybody agrees with Pete on that point. So you know, but at the same time, I mean, obviously that MC is not a judge, but that's a very influential statement, regardless of whether that MC is a judge or not. They might as well be. At that point.
He was a judge, but it like, I just felt so embarrassed. Like I just felt like I just did not feel good on stage because like I was the only one I was using the brace at a time, the bright orange one, which I was really self-conscious about. And like calling that out, like before I'd even really gone onto the stage, it just felt so gross. And like, I don't know, Supergirl like brings out the ableism. I don't know what it is, but like she's such a strong character and she's so physically strong, right? When you think of Supergirl, you think like really, really physically strong. And I think when people see her with a mobility aid, it just doesn't click in their head. And like some people, the filter just isn't there. Like their filter that says, wow, this is really hurtful and rude, just like is not in their brain. And they say something because of this disconnect between the strong character and like the cosplayer who's using a mobility aid.
I mean, I'm the first person, and I'm going to push back slightly, where I have noticed that in the comic community and the anime community, there are a lot more people in those sectors who have, you know, disabilities, whether they're physical or, you know, they're more of a mental disability or they're just socially awkward. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes what things happen is that somebody makes a socially awkward statement and they don't know they're making it. Now, I don't know if that's the case. And even still, it's really not acceptable. But it also, you know, I just happen to know, and you've been around and I've been around. I mean, I'm 20 and I've been going to cons since I was 12. So I've seen it. and I'm not, perfectly socially, Mr.
Right, right.
100% of the time, but
Mhm.
I've seen people who, their heads are down and they're not where I'm at. And I'm not trying to put anybody down, but I know people like that, and you see it, and it's clear. So
Yes.
obviously, it's tricky because I'm not the guy that if somebody says something to me at a con with crutches, I'm probably just gonna walk away.
Well, and
Because
I do too, but it sticks in your head, right? It stays with you. Like, clearly, I still remember it. And then, furthermore, if you get into like online hate comments and stuff, that's something where, like, even if you do have that problem, right? You're hitting the send button. Like, you read it before you hit the send button. Like, it's not like you just accidentally blurted it out without thinking. Like, you typed it and hit send. And like, honestly, like, it's only like 1% of people, okay? Like I said, like 99.9% of people are the most wonderful people in the world, the most fantastic and supportive. I think it just says a lot about how even 1% of hurtful comments can stick in your head and stay with you and really affect your confidence. Even if they didn't intend it, even if, like, honestly, it just comes down to education. They just don't know. And even if you just don't know, it's amazing how just that one comment that you just didn't think about can still stick with someone, even though you didn't intend any harm.
so people on the internet know that I am a fighter, and
Yeah.
people know for a fact that if you make certain comments to me, I will fight you to the end of the earth and then some. I get temporary jailed on Twitter at least 3 or 4 times a year because of this,
Yep.
and I always come back, and I come back stronger. And I'm at the stage where people know if you throw something at me, I'm going to throw it back.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
used to.
well, that's good. Mm-hmm.
And not even on a disability issue, just on a lot of things. And
Right.
people know that I will not tolerate being disrespected. So it's up on my Facebook page right now, and that thing's staying up there for a while.
Yeah.
I will not be. Rule one is don't disrespect me.
Yep.
Because I make it a point, and I will go broke to go make my point. It is a cross to die on. But that's me. I am not like everybody else.
Yeah.
So I am well aware I am not like everybody else.
Yeah.
But I find this so interesting because, obviously I'm coming from mainstream cosplay, and I know for a fact that, there's just a lot of issues. There's a lot of cattiness in it. There's a lot of politicking in it. And I can't even imagine, and maybe this is ignorant, and I'll be the first person to back out of it and rewind if I'm stepping over. But if you already have a disability, I could imagine it can be a very rough place because you're already dealing with one issue, and it's hard enough to deal with a physical disability and deal with all the politicking and all the cattiness and
Absolutely.
I don't know what the correct word is because that exists mainstream. I don't think that's
I'd say like toxicity. Maybe that's the right word.
that's a good way to put it because the way I view it is that I think one of the worst things that's happened to cosplay is the use of professional cosplayer. And I'm very adamant about this because I think it's created a big division between what cosplay is supposed to be and it for being for everyone. And people say I'm a professional cosplayer. I don't have a problem with people making money. I have a problem with the termage because I think the termage creates a bigger division than people realize. And I think it says, oh, you're not at this level if you're a cosplayer and you have 20,000 Instagram followers, but you're not making a living from it. You're not a professional. And then it changes it, and it really creates a division between the top 100 and the rest, which is not what cosplay was supposed to be.
No. And there's this saying in the cosplay community, everyone can cosplay. And it's definitely something that, like, I've talked on before about how, like, if we're going to say this, why don't we, like, make it happen? Like, I mean, there's, like, honestly, like, I could go on for hours about all the problems in the cosplay community, but this podcast is more about, like, disability in cosplay. So, like, yes, there are problems there, and that's part of what I'm working so hard on my channel to kind of just talk about, because nobody talks about it. I'd like not really on a public platform about the problems.
Let me ask you a question, because I'm actually very curious. You know, people, I like talking about certain issues that nobody talks about either. Not disability oriented, but you know, I love talking money. I love talking about taking money out of a business and what to do next. And I love talking about basics and foundations of comic book investing. But why do you think people don't talk about disability, you know, issues in cosplay? Because it seems, and maybe I'm off base here and I love to be corrected. It seems that people almost say, hey, look, I'm a little bit scared to talk about this in a lot of ways, because I don't know who is going to be supportive and who's going to, you know, maybe not attack me, but have a negative stigma attached to it.
Yes. No, with cosplay and disability, it's just there's so many parts of it, right? And like disabled people certainly are not a monolith. Every disabled person is going to have a different opinion. And I think there's definitely a lot of subjects where, you know, people have different opinions on it. And I'm certainly not, like, I don't speak for the whole cosplay community. I just speak for Colleen Cosplay. And if you relate, that's fantastic. If you don't, I'm sure you'll tell me about it in the comments. So it's just really hard. Like, one, it's scary, because not only are you going to deal with people who honestly feel called out. Well, I've talked about it before. I think there's a lot of able-bodied people who feel like I'm trying to attack them. And I'm not trying to be aggressive at all. I'm just thinking that maybe if we at least started discussing it a little, we could get somewhere. So you have to deal with people who, like, you know, they feel they have to defend themselves and maybe do that by attacking you. And then you kind of wonder, like, okay, are other disabled cosplayers on the same page as me? Like, I don't know. Like, should I bring other people in? Like, and everyone has a different experience with different disabilities. Like, disability is just so diverse. Like, I can only talk about physical joint related disabilities and mobility aids. And it's just such a large topic to tackle. And there's so many different things I could talk about. I could talk about, you know, the accessibility. I could talk about ableism. I could talk about...
Give an example. So I have a physical disability and I walk around with crutches. Oh, that's not a secret. We agree on some things and we're probably going to disagree on others. Yes. But we both have a physical disability. Obviously, I have a hereditary spastic paraplegia. And I'm not going to go into the entire thing of that. It's complicated. It's one of those, I have a rare form of it, and it's a progressive disease. So obviously I am well aware of what progressive disease looks like. I think yours is somewhat similar to being progressive.
Yes.
And so obviously I'm well aware of that. And so when we talk about a con and we say, oh my God, this con's huge and my leg hurts, that's very relatable, but we also disagree on other things. And that's why this is so complicated, because somebody who has, if you and me we're cosplaying, we're going to have different views on certain things.
Right.
So interesting. And I think it's very complicated because I don't want to come in and offend you. And, you know, this is why this interview took me like 9 hours to write. Because I'm like,
oh my gosh, you spent 9 hours on this?
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out how to write it. This is one of the longest interviews probably in almost 2 years, where I'm like, oh, shit, how do I write this?
It's honestly hard to approach disability too, because there are so many different aspects and there, like, so many people feel so differently. Some people would be like horribly offended if you ask them to say what their disability is. I personally have it publicly on my YouTube. Like, you know, it's just so different among people. It's just so hard to tackle it. And like, I can only say Colleen Cosplay's experience. I can't start the discussion on anything broader than that.
And so it's very complicated, and obviously I view cons very differently because I present panels. I'm a fan panelist.
Right.
And, you know, there's a reason for that. I mean, the quick synopsis is that I knew that I couldn't run around a con, so I had to attract attention to me, and that was back in 2012, 2013. So I've been doing this for 8+ years, attracting attention to me, and there's rationale and theory behind it. And it's a very different mentality when you start thinking. So it's super interesting. But again, I don't really know how, and also with certain things that I do, like I'm building out an entire comic book investing class. I don't want that to be disability first. It's a class for everybody that everybody can do. It just so happens that the guy who's running it has a physical disability. But I don't want that to be the main focus, nor
I could totally relate with my YouTube. Like I make tutorials, like I have a video on how I sewed this. And if you look through the comments, like a lot of people just also want to make it about disability. They want to make every video about disability. And I get it. Like I have a disability. I make some videos on it. But yeah, it's really hard to kind of just like, hey, I just want to like make a video about how I sewed stuff and like which fabrics and stitching techniques I used. And it's all like a very complicated topic to tackle.
And I'm obviously in a more, privileged position on this because what I run right now, if I didn't disclose that I had a disability, nobody would know. Obviously yours, and I say this, a little nervously, is you're very much more public about it than I am. I don't make my entire podcast about this, but obviously I have some expertise in it because I live in it. If that makes any sense. It's like
experience,
it sounds so weird when I say it, but it's such an interesting topic to talk about it. And I think that, so many people don't know about it. And I think it's very interesting. And obviously I'm not thrilled with the cosplay community. And I have friends who do things, and there's certain cosplayers that, I think the leaders in the cosplay community, I'll say it, and feel free to disagree with me or disassociate with what I'm going to say. I think when COVID hit, I think a bunch of the leaders let down that community. I really think that a bunch of the leaders in the top 100 cosplayers actually failed, from an industry and influencer standpoint, the entire cosplay community. I really believe that. And I believe that there's a referendum actually taking place right now in cosplay. And I think people like you and a bunch of other people with 15,000 less fans on Instagram have actually made inroads, while some of the top cosplayers have actually lost roads. And
a lot of people went on a hiatus. Like the burnout was so bad without cons. And like I have YouTube, so I make cosplays whether there are cons or not. Like obviously cons help, but like I still do weekly uploads. I'm not going to just stop like uploading, but a lot of people did, definitely. And I think just like the lack of motivation, the burnout, like it was hard. It was a really hard year. And I don't like blame those people for stepping back. If you have to step back for your mental health, like go for it. But I also kept creating, and what you're saying where like maybe that helped bump me up, I do think that is true. Yeah.
I have a very different opinion where I think that if you are a thought leader in a particular segment, I'm not saying don't deal with your mental health, but you also got to get up and do something. I went outside the cave in the middle of COVID. I had more than enough content that I could have produced. I had 45 interviews for my other show that I could have just sat back and released and been perfectly fine. But I said, hey, look, I got to go do something for all these people getting screwed.
Got to keep creating,
I created this entire show out of nothing when I legitimately had nothing. And I was on the brink. And I went out there and I started hunting and went hard. And I'm not saying it was easy. There were days that I didn't want to do it. There are days right now I don't want to do it. No offense to my friends. I'm going to say this very openly. That last live thing sort of got me a little bit down, where I feel really beat up from certain people who were making suggestions. But here I am because I have to be here. And so that's my gripe, is that I'm the guy who's getting shit done. And I think that's the thing. That's how I view my entire disability.
I think
I got to get it done.
I think it's kind of what you're talking about with like the difference between professional cosplayers and hobbyist cosplayers, and how like since we now have professional cosplayers, they're kind of on this different tier. And I think that's more kind of what you're getting at, if I understand it right.
I'm a professional podcaster by definition.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not a money podcaster. I'm a professional podcaster because this is treated like a job. And you could be, I had somebody cancel on me today. What did I do? I went out there and I built an entire panel within 3 hours because I'm a professional. And I think
that's different. Like, if it is a job, I could totally understand people where it's a hobby. Like you were just saying, like, I don't really want to do contests. I don't want to make money. I just want to dress up for fun. Like, I think there's definitely a distinction that can be made between hobbyist and professional. I'm like in this weird gray area, which maybe you could just call side hustle. So.
Oh, no, this is a side hustle. I just treat it like a job. This is my second job.
I treat my side hustle like a side hustle.
So I'll ask you a question. How much time do you spend on your side hustle, which is this?
I usually spend about, I'd say, 10 hours a week.
That's a lot.
Like, no, that's like editing. That's not even like the filming, really. Because if you count, I guess it depends on what you're counting. Do you count the time I spend sewing the costume? Because I'd be doing that. Week in, week out. I'm so curious because I'm making a point here. This is such a cool discussion. Like, including how much it takes to sew?
Yeah, like you. So when you're creating content, how many cosplays do you make a year?
I usually make anywhere from like 12 to 16, but like last year was like really rough, and I also had trouble with motivation and taking a step back, so not as many this last year, but usually at least 12. So
I'll give my number. Writing 4 interviews takes anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. Pushing it out on social media takes another 2 to 3. So
you're pretty fast.
I've been doing this for 8 years.
I'm just saying it would take me much longer to do what you do.
so that's about, conservatively, it's about 10 hours there. It's about 5 hours of interviewing, so 15. And then booking guests is like 2. And then I do a lot of intricate other stuff out there, commenting, making connections, doing a few guest appearances. I'm probably spending about 20, 25 hours a week. Easy.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a part-time job. Like anyone would call that a part-time job at least.
And then I work a 15-hour week. That's going to go up to 40. And this is me operating at about 45% capacity. If to me, I'd be doing 8 a week, and I'd be doing all on Sunday from 10 to legitly 6. And I'm one of those guys that's the plan going forward, where I'm the most content producing. And my goal is to pass Joe Rogan in content and build out a team. So the point I'm trying to make is that that's a professional. Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the side hustle. Like, now that you explain it, I'm definitely side hustle cosplayer.
I don't say this to gloat. It's the only way I know how to do anything. And believe me, I would say there's about 30% of the time I don't want to do half the shit I'm doing.
Oh, definitely. Like, there are a lot of times where, like, oh gosh, for the longest time, my husband would just be like, "Why don't you quit YouTube? Please quit YouTube. Like, you are upset. You are upset while you are editing this video. Please just quit." And I'm like, I have to.
So it's super interesting in that regard. And the reason why I asked this is because obviously at this stage, you're now a thought leader. You're now
Well, I don't know if I'd call myself that. I think I'm just Colleen, and I post funny videos on the internet.
So the reason why I say it, though, is that we assume roles in life. Like right now, I'm going to be assuming a role probably in February, and I don't want to dive too much into what I'm doing because people are going to not be happy with me. I don't want it to pay me a lot of money. Because I'm going to be the answer to a bunch of solutions. And they don't know how to do what I want to do. And the people are going to take the risk on me are going to make a lot of money on me. But the idea is that I'm going to become very much a thought leader, and that's what you're becoming, in my view, because now you are very much an advocate for disabilities in cosplay. You're an example. You're sort of, the role model in a lot of ways. And that's because you have a YouTube channel, and it doesn't matter that it's big. If you type in disabled Supergirl, it's going to pop up.
Yeah, actually, if you type in disabled cosplayer, I'm like the first 5 videos or something.
So at this stage, when somebody says, "Hey, I'm a disabled cosplayer," and they're floating around on YouTube, which is the second largest search engine,
Yep.
you know, you're popping up, and that's a thought.
Oh, it shows up in Google too, usually.
So what is that like for you? Because it's a very weird position to be in.
It's a lot of pressure sometimes. Because, like I said, there's a huge disabled cosplay community. Like, there's so many people out there who cosplay with disabilities. I'm just the one who decided to make a YouTube channel about it. And like you said, when you type in disabled cosplayer, I show up. So basically, if you want to find a disabled cosplayer, a lot of people land on my channel. And so it definitely is, I think, kind of pushing me more towards that advocate role, like you were saying, where I just kind of started as like, hey, I just want to help people. And now, like, people like you, I assume you found my content on the internet somewhere. You're like,
on Instagram.
Oh, really? On Instagram, not YouTube. Interesting.
I'll explain that theory. So right now I'm trying to balance out my entire interview, I guess, porn, for lack of a better word. So I go look up cosplayers, and then people pop up. And I'm like, oh, cool. Somebody fits this description.
Right.
They obviously, you know, I have a disability. So I'm like, hey, who's a disability cosplayer and who actually looks like a good human being and actually is talented enough and actually seems like they're going to say yes. It sounds so messed up. You know, I sort of stereotyped you slightly, but also you had less than 15,000 Instagram followers, which means that you qualify, because I'm not interested in cosplayers who have above that. And there's a reason.
If they have more than that, they're probably in the phase where they're going to ask you to pay a bunch of money, or they're going to ask for like a biography or something. And like,
what it is that some of them say yes, some of them say no. It's just that some of them have what I call princess syndrome, meaning it sounds where.
No, I know what you're talking about. That's why I'm laughing.
And so I look up and I say, okay, cool. I'm a big DC Comics fan too, you know, and that's the other thing too, is that I gravitate towards certain cosplays because I know certain cosplays. If you are a cosplayer cosplaying animes that I've never watched, I'm probably not going to hit you up because I'm not an expert in those things. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing too, is that you met a bunch of requirements in my book, and that's and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually just logic, you know. If you're a big Marvel fan, you know, there's somebody like me out there who does Marvel interviews. I'm a DC guy. I was born and bred in DC Comics. I still loved my DC Comics. But I digress. But continue. Sorry for interrupting. It's very rude of me.
What was I saying?
We got off on a tangent. We do that on the show a lot.
I was saying how, like, because I'm easily like searchable through Google and YouTube, I'm ending up getting a lot of opportunities, because if someone wants to talk about these topics, which, like, as we've discussed through this interview, like, it's not talked about enough. Like, I think a lot of people like you are realizing that this is something that just doesn't get talked about, and it's something that's missing on the internet. Like, the internet is so huge, and there's so little content on cosplay and disability. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. And I'm the first one who pops up in the search. So I'm getting a lot of people like you reaching out for me to like do certain things.
Yeah. And I don't get any opportunities, but I'm not public and I don't want those opportunities.
Have you tried cosplaying Supergirl?
I would make a fine Supergirl. No, I do not want to cosplay. It is not something I want to do.
So much fun.
I tried. It's not for me. It's awkward for me.
I guess podcasting isn't for me, so I guess it's okay.
I love talking about certain topics.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing to talk about is money and conventions and money and collectibles. Yeah. And I'm planning to build a multi-million-dollar business on that topic, and I'm going to be building a marketing firm as well, because I understand that. And
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm gonna go buy a Dodge Challenger Hellcat SRT, and I'm gonna get it souped up, and I'm gonna turn it into a
Just
15.
buy a really, really expensive costume and wear it.
No, I'm just gonna go in and then buy a $85,000 car when I make money.
Okay, I guess that's acceptable.
And then go wrap it in and make it in a Kari, and it's gonna be so sick. I know exactly what's gonna be on the hood of that car. I know exactly what's gonna be on the hood of that car. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be like Ezra from Fairy Tale on the hood of that car. It's gonna be phenomenal.
Nice.
And then they're gonna have sakura flowers on, shooting into it, but it's gonna be wrapped. It's gonna be wrapped so it doesn't actually damage the car. Yeah. So when I resell the car, I'm gonna make money on it.
Nice. Sounds like you got a good plan.
I do. I want to do it before I'm 30. This way I could go drive and become a senator in my nice Dodge Challenger Hellcat SRT, and then go really fast and get pulled over, and then put the congressional doctrine that you can't get a ticket while you're technically going to work.
Oh, gosh.
I'm going to be the first senator to do it. It's going to be great. But I digress, because we got way off topic from
definitely.
which is perfectly where we're leading into this. See, I was purposely leading all the way into this. There's the whole point of the interview is talking about me committing a crime, which leads right into Captain America, which is standing right next to you. So what's the story behind that?
Actually, it's a really cool story. So I love doing cosplayer collabs. I commit to way too many. And this was actually for a collab with some other cosplayers. So we call ourselves the Dis-Avengers, and it's actually a group of disabled cosplayers who cosplay the Avengers. And I didn't start it. I'm just a member. It wasn't my idea.
You guys should seriously consider doing frisbees. You should seriously consider that. I think you would legitimately sell out at cons if you made frisbees with the Dis-Avengers on it.
But, no, it's a really cool collab. And so basically, we're picking out pieces of media that have very little disabled representation. So we picked out Marvel with the Avengers because they have hardly any disabled representation. And furthermore, they took canonically disabled characters from the Avengers and made them able-bodied in the movies. So we are taking those characters.
Okay. I gotta stop you. Who is disabled in the Avengers?
Oh, Hawkeye is deaf. He's a hearing aid.
Okay, I did not know that.
Exactly, because there's no representation.
No, I was legitimately asking because I did not know. This is
no. Hawkeye canonically uses a hearing aid in the comics, and they took it away when they made the movie. So we are cosplaying as the Avengers, and we all have disabilities, and we're hoping to kind of get the attention of some people who do film and stuff and say hey, it'd be cool if you let disabled people be in your movies. That'd be nice. So I was the Captain America for the group. And
there's some real spokes in that too.
Oh, yeah. I really loved the Captain America shields. That was one of my favorite projects I've done. I think they turned out so cool.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on with you, and I didn't really get to half of what I wanted to talk about, which is really not good. It's really not good. This happens in every interview. I don't get to half of what I want to do, and then I spend 9 hours writing, and I'm just it's terrible.
Well, I appreciate your 9 hours of work. That was I was so surprised when you knew all of these really obscure cosplays I'd done. I'm wow, he did a lot of research, and I don't think I'm that interesting.
It wasn't the research; it was figuring out how to write it.
Exactly. That's what we were talking about. Talking about cosplay and disability is just such a complicated topic. It's how do you present it in a way that's still positive, that's informative and educational, but isn't aggressive and isn't, there's just so hard. And I think you did a good job. So
yeah, well, I hope I did, because clearly I don't know how many interviews you've seen I've done, but I am not politically correct anytime soon.
Well, you did a good job this time.
I am very not politically correct.
Yeah.
So having said all that, and we missed a bunch of them, so I'm the first person to say that this is like half of what we dealt with.
Yeah.
But I am curious, because we touched on it briefly, is that obviously, and I'll just say how I feel, is that there's been a bit of a shift due to cons not happening and COVID. And obviously, a lot more people I feel have popped up on Instagram. I also feel like there's been a little bit of a power shift with, some of the top cosplayers. One of the things that I noticed, I don't know if you noticed, is that Hot Topic is now working with a lot of cosplayers who have less than 10,000 followers. And that's how
I did notice that. I thought they just had like networking or like their dad worked there or something. Like
my understanding is that obviously I know Todd Way. Todd Way was on my show and I had a blast with Todd Way. And he's really big on TikTok. He was happy to be on my show, and I'm like, dude, why? It was a really cool conversation.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that what started happening is that I think Hot Topic realized that the engagement rate on these top cosplayers is not a lot. If you have 4.1 million followers, and we all know who I'm talking about, and you only have 200,000 likes, that's a 5% conversion. That's not an impressive conversion.
Yep.
I've had videos where I've had a 90% conversion on products.
Or over 100% of like, you get more likes and like views than you even have followers.
And so I've gotten I've had conversion rates where I've had 500 people watching something and 250 of them have bought something or have come back or have been back to project. I've gotten conversion rates for people on Kickstarter where I've legitimately found them 20 backers because of my show. And while my show only did 400 views, that's a lot larger of a conversion rate.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's part of why it's happened is that, I got no problem naming Jessica Nigeri. It's not a secret. You go on one of her videos, she has 238,000 likes. That's a 5.8 conversion rate. That's not impressive. And Hot Topic and other companies are looking at this and saying, hey, we don't mind you having this big of a number, but we also were expecting back 2 years ago, you had a 10% conversion rate. What's going on? And the reason why I bring this up, I'm curious how you think about it, is that has only started to happen. And I think COVID has had a huge impact on that.
Definitely.
And I think that there's a rise of indie. And I come from indie comics as well. And it's clear to me that that's sort of what's going on. Just as a spectator and as somebody who's a businessman, that this is the ship to rise on. And my podcast and these live streams are very predicated on that. It's a big spec bet. And I don't think I'm wrong. I don't. And
I think there was a lot of opportunity, and those who grabbed the opportunity, I think, benefited. And like, I'll be honest, like it was hard. It was like really, really hard to create content during the pandemic. I didn't have any fabric. Like, a lot of people just weren't interested in cosplay because there were no cons. But I kind of had this idea that if I kept creating, then when cons came back, I would have this pool of content that I built up that people could kind of reference. And so far it's been working pretty well. There's a lot of videos I made in the pandemic that are just now getting noticed because people are coming back to it. But there was definitely, I think, a lot of opportunity. And, if some people needed to step back, like, good for them, do what's good for them. But if some people also wanted to, really grind out and try and grow, then good for those people too. So it's just kind of how it worked.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely growing, and it's interesting, except my channel and YouTube is not doing so well. But as a person, I am, so that's all that counts.
Hey, that's good.
I have to retool my entire position, and it's coming because the show's evolved in the last 4 months. Also, I'm pretty tired. I got to make it out another 5 weeks, and then I got a 2-week vacation.
Hey, enjoy your vacation.
5 weeks, like I think 25 more interviews. So I got a long road out of hell.
Yeah.
But having said that, I do want to give you a chance for self-promotion. So where can people find you on YouTube, find you on Instagram, Twitter, the interwebs, website, Gumroad store, all that?
It's pretty simple. I'm only on YouTube and Instagram right now, and it's just Colleen Cosplay on both. And if you like Google Colleen Cosplay, you'll find some other things too. But I'm only really on YouTube and Instagram. I don't do the other stuff. It's too much for me.
Well, there you go on that. That's pretty self-explanatory, pretty out there and pretty simple. So first and foremost, you should go obviously support that her Colleen on subscribing to YouTube. Obviously, I guess liking, following on Instagram. I think it is, right.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and YouTube. Colleen Cosplay on both.
So obviously subscribe on YouTube, follow on Instagram. Because I'm really tired. I didn't even remember what you do on Instagram. Wow, it's a long day. A really long day, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm off tomorrow from work, so it's all right. So having said that, and what I'm going to continue to say it, is you have to support indie content creators and cosplayers. And the way you do that, and I'm going to say it for a third time, because I can count still, is subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, and actually engage. Share it out. It goes a long way when you
comment
share.
so far too, and I like them. If you leave me a comment, I'll give it a little heart and I'll say thank you.
That too, and it's super important at this stage in the game because that tells these social media platforms and these algorithms that people are interested. They show it to more people, as well as if you subscribe on YouTube, you'll be notified when new videos come out. And then you can actually go watch it. And the more people that watch a video, the more it gets exposed and the more it gets out there. So it's very important that you support, cosplayers. And when cosplayers are at shows and when cosplayers have booths and they have prints and they're involved in projects, supporting those projects because it goes a long way and it's so important. And look, I'm an indie content creator. Obviously I have a sponsor for this show and that sponsor helps. But, running this project is not cheap. It's quite, tiring. It's difficult. And I would appreciate, people, sharing this, liking it, as well as buying me a coffee. And what that is that's like a Patreon type thing. And you could buy 1, 5, or 50. And all the money that is done for Buy Me a Coffee goes right back into the show and continues to grow, continues to produce content. And, it also helps me, get a new camera, get new lights, run Facebook ads, run promotion, actually have people to help me out. And so it's very important in that regard as well. But more importantly than money is sharing, liking, commenting, because that stuff goes a long way. And even just shoot me a message, because I read messages and you say, hey, I really enjoyed what you did. And my Twitter's open, my Facebook's open, YouTube's open. And, that makes me feel special inside and I appreciate it. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
The final word? Oh, can I do my YouTube outro?
Or words. It's up to you. Final word, final statement. If you go with you are the weakest link. That's cool too.
Awesome. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. And he'll see you all on the next one.